Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, it's Jocelyn Hardrick, president and founder of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit behind this podcast and our Journey to Esquire blog and scholarship and leadership program. I'm so excited today. We're passing the mic to Kelly Charles Collins. She's a keynote and award-winning TEDx speaker, retired trial attorney and law firm partner, and author, and she sought after authority in courageous conversations, unconscious bias, and women's empowerment. She's a transformative speaker and has media features included in ABC, NBC, CBS, Time.com, Forbes, Fast Company, Authority Magazine, Women's Wear Daily, and more. She's also the author of Conversations Change Things, the PER Perfect Framework for Courageous Conversations, and Unapologetic AF. I'll let you figure out what the AF stands for. 34 Ways to Unleash Your Inner Badass. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm so happy to be here. It's been like we've been talking about this forever, and I'm finally here, so this is good.
Yes, it is. And I just want to give a little note. I first saw Kelly speak a few years ago at a local bar association. She was still, a trial attorney at the time and partner. And we were talking about, how do we make all this stuff work? It's so intense being a trial attorney and being a mom and being a wife and just trying to have a life outside of work. Yes. And since then, she has transformed her career. I've watched her do it, and I've watched the lives that she has touched. We interviewed Precious. She's one of the women that Kelly has worked with. So, and she's an outstanding speaker, and she does all this great stuff right now. But before we get into all of that, we're going to go back in time. And we're going to talk about her journey to Esquire. Yeah. Now, why did you decide to become a lawyer?
So it's funny. You know how some people, like in their family, they're like, all these people are lawyers. My grandfather was a lawyer, but it was never, ever, ever anything that I wanted to do. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a bank lady or a truck driver. So I grew up in Jamaica. You see all the women in the bank and they're dressed up and everything, right? So I wanted to be a bank lady or a truck driver. Don't know where the truck driver came from. So, I went to school, I went to college, I got a fashion degree, I got a degree in retail marketing and management. And then I was getting my master's degree in international business management. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine from high school. And he was talking about the fact that he was going to go to law school. And at the time I was 20 years old, had just had a baby. Or did I have my baby at the time? I was 21. So I had just had my baby, and we were having this conversation, and I was like, that's really interesting. And I used to love, like, one of my favorite shows was Cops. And when at the time I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, and I worked for a trust company, a bank. And right next door was the courthouse. And I would go over there like on a break and just watch. And I loved like the pomp and the circumstance of the court. It's like old America in there. And, the judges sat up high, and it was just this regal experience. And so he was having this conversation, and I was like, well, I'm 21. I have this baby. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I just didn't know. And he said he was going to go to law school. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to law school. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to law school. So I decided in that moment I was going to go to law school. I figured out how I was going to take the LSAT. I didn't study for the LSAT. And I was like, okay, I'm graduating with my master's degree in November. So somebody has got to get me in their school in January, because if I have to wait, I'm not going to go. And so I found two schools, one in San Francisco, and I think the other one was like in Minnesota somewhere. And I was like, I'm from Jamaica. I'm already in Rhode Island and it's cold. I am not about to go any further into this wilderness. And so I ended up just applying to the one law school. And that's how I ended up going to law school. It was never anything planned. It was truly just a whim.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had a classmate like that. She's like, oh, my friend said she was going to LSAT and I just went with her. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know how long I studied for this thing?
I didn't study, which was not, I don't recommend that.
Yes, we don't recommend it.
I don't recommend not studying.
A few people could get away with it, but you got to study. So.
Yeah. And I didn't do well.
Wow. So you ended up, so how did you get from Jamaica to Rhode Island? Because you said you were from Jamaica.
So I was born in Jamaica. We moved to the United States when I was 9.
Okay.
And then at 16, I moved to Providence to go to college. And I was there until I was 21. And then I left and went back to Florida for a quick stint and then went off to law school in San Francisco.
Wow, let's not just gloss over the fact that you went to college at 16, because you said that like that's the norm. So you started college early, you were already, academically gifted.
Well, actually, so in Jamaica, we start school at ages 3 or 4, right? And so I started school really early. And if they had actually put me in my correct grade, right, based on where I was in Jamaica, I actually would have graduated at 15. But when I came to the United States, they wanted to put me back like 2 grades because I was actually supposed to be going into like what was the equivalent of the 7th grade in the United States, but I was 9. And so they were like, no, we're not doing that. And then they wanted to put me in the 5th grade. And my mother was like, no, she just completed the 5th grade. So we compromised and I ended up in the 6th grade. So I graduated at 16.
Oh, wow. I do hear that from a lot of people from the Caribbean, because the Caribbean educational system is very different based on like more European style, but also it's just a little more advanced in the type of the work that you do. You graduate at an early age, but in the US, they're very much based on like your age, and that's where you belong.
Like when's
instead
your birthday?
Of your ability.
Right. When's your birthday? So it was a battle, but I think it was good. I mean, at 15, I would have figured it out too, but at 16, I went off into the world of college.
And you became a mom at 21. So you said that as well, and decided to go to law school as a new mom. So really interesting. So what was your law school experience like? You up and moved to San Francisco, you have a new baby.
So I was a new mom. So my son, by the time I decided to go to law school, I started in January of 1993. So yes, I'm old, y'all. In 1993. And because he was so young and because it was just me and I was a single mom and I was going off to law school, I had to leave my son in Florida with my mom and my sister so they could raise him so I could go to law school. So law school was interesting. I went to Golden Gate University, School of Law, so a smaller law school. I was one of very few Black people in the law school. I loved it there. I loved the school. I loved my classes. I loved the experience. It taught me a lot. Didn't teach me how to be a lawyer, but it taught me some of it. I shouldn't say that. Like I had one of my favorite classes was courtroom as theater. And that did teach me a lot, and being on moot court and all that stuff did teach me a lot. But I enjoyed the experience of law school. I think because I was at a different stage in my life too, like some of the things that people encounter in school, like some of the competitiveness and some of the things I didn't have time to be a part of. And my school was also one where there were a lot of older people, like people who are second career, like this is going to be their second career. So I think it was a little bit of a different experience. My classes weren't huge. I think when I graduated, how many people did graduate? Maybe 200, maybe 500. I think 500, maybe. So it was small.
Yeah. And then law schools have been shrinking. So the numbers can really vary depending on, what year you graduated. But I think it's important to note that don't get caught up in the foolishness, all the competitive competition. We all can graduate and become lawyers. It's okay,
And ours was worse because like now you have the internet, right? So you have access to everything. We have books.
Yes.
So when they're talking about go shepherdize and go look up this and what we had actual books, and then we had to wait for the insert to come in, the update, and they would stick it in the back of the book. And so people would take those out. They would tear pages out of the books, right? So on the internet, it's like, well, I don't care what you do. I can still go find it. No, so all of that kind of, I was just like, I don't have time for this. Like I have to get up and get out of here, which, I ended up graduating law school in 2.5 years because I was like, I got to go. I have a child. I don't have time to sit here. I gotta
exactly.
go.
Yeah. Okay. So you have your child in Florida and you're graduating in California. What was your job search like when you were graduating, and how did you get in your first area of practice?
I always knew. So when I was in law school, I interned at the public defender's office, 2 different public defender's offices, so San Francisco and San Jose. And I also interned at the death penalty appeals office in California. And I was part of the environmental law, what they call it's not the lab,
this like externship or clinic.
No, it was how they have like inside like law schools, they have the bankruptcy and they help people outside.
The clinic.
Right now. Yeah, the clinic. Yes. So the environmental law clinic, which is really interesting, but I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And so I said, like Cops is like one of my favorite shows. And so I just always wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. But I also knew that, I went to law school in California. And again, the only reason I was there in California was because that was a school that I could start in January. I didn't care, where it was ranked, none of that stuff. Like none of that meant anything to me. But I also knew that I wasn't going to stay in California. So I was never going to take the California bar. I was never going to live there or practice there. And my mom was a judicial assistant. And was she? Yeah, she was a judicial assistant at that time. But she also worked for a man by the name of George Knox, who is very well known in the circles, legal circles in Florida. And he was like my godfather, right? He's just like family to us. And I told him what I wanted to do and where I wanted to work. And so he got me an interview at the public defender's office. So, the importance of having somebody like as a sponsor who can speak your name in rooms, because here it is, I'm coming from California and they don't know who the heck I am. I don't know Florida law really. And so, they took the chance and interviewed me. I had a whole panel interview and I was hired to be a public defender.
Oh, wow. So obviously you went into some other things given the topics that you talk about now. So before we go into that, what is the advice you'd offer to new and future law students, given your unique story?
Really think about what it is, like, why are you going to law school, right? So I went to law school as just, I wanted there to be a better life and on a whim, and just realizing that this could be a way out, right? Like a better way of life. But, we think about where our generations are now. And I think it's important for them to really understand why they're going into the practice of law. Many of us went into the practice of law because it's like, we go into the practice of law, we're going to practice, we're going to be there forever, we're going to retire from this is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. And we know that that's not how people live these days, right? That we know that's not how millennials and Gen Z think of the world, right? Gen Z can create their own economy, just by opening their phone. And so I would say to them to think about what it is that you want to do. Do you want to just practice, right? Do you want to be a trial lawyer? Do you want to be a transactional attorney? And go figure out what that means, right? Because people see TV and that's not how it goes, right? What you see on TV is not how it works. And so really go understand what it is that you want to do. On the other hand, some people want a law degree because of the leverage that having a law degree gives you, right? And so you don't have to go practice, but you get your law degree because in law school, they teach you how to think, right? Which is one of the most masterful things, right? To be able to understand how to think, how to analyze information, how to look at both sides, how to advocate, right? For yourself and for others. So there's skills that you learn in law school that you don't learn, for example, in business school, right? And having Esquire or JD, whatever you want to put after your name, there's a level of status and people listen to you at a different level. So really think about what it is that you want to do and start from the very beginning, like planning and, you know, what classes you're taking, what clinics you're a part of, what internships you're going for, what relationships you're building. One of the things I wish that I had known sooner is like about building, you know, really long-term relationships, but really do those things and have those things in mind every step of the way. Don't just go to law school to be like, oh, I'm going to law school and, you know, I'll graduate and I'll figure out what the job is. No, day one, like even before day one, like you need to have a plan of how you're going to use this experience to get you to where you want to go.
That's excellent. And speaking of leverage, one of the first things I saw you do after you kind of left the law firm life was create a group called Ladies Who Leverage. Mm-hmm. And so what was that about and what has that like transformed into?
Yeah. So, you know, the reason I left the practice of law, I was transitioning out of the practice of law, starting in like my brain had started to transition the end of 2017. And in 2019, I was called into my partner's office and told that by the end of the year, they would no longer be able to pay me, right? They couldn't afford me anymore. And so I wouldn't have a job. And at that time, I had already started building my professional speaking business. I knew that there was more, right? So talking about how do you leverage, you know, the law. And I wanted to get out of the confines of the law. So I started, you know, speaking. I'd written a book. I'd done my TEDx. And so when that happened and I transitioned, I was like, okay, great. So here it is, right? January of 2020. I am now like, I'm going out into the world to be a professional speaker. And then March of 2020, COVID was like, hold up, wait. I don't think y'all are going out and doing much of anything. But I also knew that as a practicing lawyer, I would talk to women lawyers and they always said, you know, I need a sisterhood. I want, you know, this. We know the law is a jealous mistress, right? And so we like getting together and speaking about the things that impacted you or whatever. We have to be very careful. I know I was very careful as a lawyer about who I told what and what I told, right? Mm-hmm. And I told very little because I was like, you're not about to use any of this to your advantage over me. And so I realized that I needed a space. And it's funny because before I created Ladies Who Leverage, I had created something called Sisters-in-Law. And the whole point was because I had been to these meetings and I'd heard all these women lawyers, particularly Black women lawyers, talking about that they needed this space. So I created this space. And Jocelyn, I got so much pushback.
Wow.
Like they didn't want to do it. It's too expensive, whatever. And what I realized was we are so tied as lawyers. So this is something I want younger lawyers to think about too. One of the things that I was very conscious about from the very beginning was to realize that being a lawyer is what I did for a living, not who I was as a person.
Yes.
And what I realized in that moment, like the feedback that I was getting, it was like, wow, you're so stuck to being lawyer that you can't see the forest for the trees. Like you can't even see that there is a way beyond this and that you could get together and learn other things. You don't have to leave the practice of law, but we're so stuck in like going to CLEs and every conference. Well, they were asking me, am I getting CLEs? Are you serious? Like, come on, you can go anywhere and get CLEs. And so I started to understand that, this mindset is really messed up inside the law. And then I thought, well, really what I want to do is help women. So they don't have to be lawyers. They could be lawyers. And so I started Ladies Who Leverage because I wanted to create a space where women could come together, ask for what they wanted, what they needed, with no judgment, without fear or anything. And so I coined the word collabosourcing, which means to leverage your expertise, your resources, and your relationships to build your business, your brand, and your badassery, right? Because I really wanted women to understand how powerful we are at our core, and that when you work together, as opposed to what everybody is saying, like, oh, women can't work together, they're so catty, and, you know, there's competition. And so we, you know, the motto was, we don't compete, we collabosource. And so I created the space to bring women together to have that safe space, but also to really understand their true power, right? And so
yeah. And what happened as a result of Ladies Who Leverage? What kind of results did you get when women got together?
Oh my gosh, there's women out here who have businesses that they wouldn't have had before. There's people out here, there's speakers out here charging money that they would never have charged, just because, you know, having conversations where I've spoken to them. You know, you talked about Precious, and Precious says this, you know, out in the world. So it's not something that, you know, I'm like talking out of school, but Precious will tell you that, you know, what I saw in her, and, you know, called her and said, hey, what you're doing, you need to be doing on a bigger scale. There's lots of speakers out here in the world that are charging things that they weren't before I started talking to them about, you know, through the lens of Ladies Who Leverage. There's Deani Winter-Funday, who's an attorney, and she'll tell you like what she's doing now in the world, and just the expansion of her mind came from Ladies Who Leverage. You were talking about a post that Deani actually started that post talking about, you know, where it began. And so there's so many women that are doing things in the world. There's a distinct group of women who came out of Ladies Who Leverage, who that environment, particularly during the pandemic, and having that safe space, and somebody like me who would pour into them and really, you know, instill that you're powerful. Like, you can do anything that you put your mind to. You just have to want to do it. So it's great to see all of them out in the world doing amazing things. And, you know, it's on hiatus right now because I've you know, shifted my focus a little bit, but it's great to see them all there, and maybe one day I'll revive it.
Yeah, Mandy Clay is another person who's been on this podcast. Yep, she was a part of it. And I actually connected. I was on the fringes of Ladies Who Leverage, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the women. I follow them, and we support one another. And you know, you started that spark of women like, hey, let's connect with one another. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting to see like the women working together, doing things together. It's like, you just never know the power of an idea. And so sometimes you just have to take the leap and put it out there in the world and see what happens. And, you know, again, this is also like thinking beyond, right? Lawyering, right? Like, what can I do? We have so many skills. We are brilliant, right? When you go to law school, you're not everybody, right? It's brilliant, but most, you know, we know.
Yes, we've all met those people that's like, how you got in here?
Right. That's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
But there's so much you can do and leverage. So, you know, when I was thinking of transitioning, I was like, I'm going to leverage my profession to pursue my purpose. Right. And so that's what I've done since retiring in 2019.
Nice. Leverage your profession to pursue your purpose. So one of the big things you're doing now is showing people how to put together their signature talk. So you've written books, and you've written articles, and you've done interviews, but this is a big thing you're doing now, your signature talk, which is great because lawyers, first of all, we're trained, like you said, to think, to solve problems, to analyze, and talking is part of our profession. So why not turn this into another source of income and a way to have an impact? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things, if you're a trial lawyer, you speak, right? And so you know how to speak, you know how to advocate for other people. And so, you know, when I retired, it was to become a full-time professional speaker, which I still am, right? So as an entrepreneur. But what I also realized is that when people look at us, particularly Black women, in this profession of speaking, there isn't a lot of value placed on who we are, right? And so they either want you to speak for free or exposure, or they want you to speak for less than everyone else. And what I understood when I was entering into this profession was I didn't need anyone to teach me how to speak. I needed to understand the business of speaking. And so as I have been speaking to speakers and watching people, I realized that there's a real disconnect. And one of the reasons that, and I'm gonna talk about Black women, especially Black women, aren't getting, paid to speak, or even as lawyers and doctors and accountants and whatever, we're like, oh yeah, just give me a bag of potato chips, I'll be fine. Meanwhile, we're charging our clients, hundreds of dollars an hour. As lawyers, is that we don't understand that there is a business related to speaking, right? And so if we thought of it as a business, and then we thought of what we do on stage and the value that we give as the product, that we would understand, oh no, you're going to pay me for this, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to pay me for this. But then I also realized that for those who, because I really work with professionals who are experts in their field, right? So not motivational speakers, not really new speakers, but if you have a deep level of expertise, but they don't know how to message that so that the corporations will pay them and, associations will pay them. They don't know how to message that because a lot of people just keep getting told, just tell your story. Corporations, they don't care about your story. They're not buying that, right? They want to know what is the value proposition for their leaders, for their employees. And so I started Speaker Moguls because I wanted people to understand the business and branding of speaking. But then I realized even in that, I was like, no, they don't even understand that they have to have a product. And that product is the Signature Talk. And so my sister and I worked to develop a whole framework called the Signature Talk Blackprint that we use to help speakers develop their talk, both from the point of view of being the talent who's speaking on stage, but also the CEO or the quote, when you're a solopreneur, you're everything. So the CEO/salesperson who has to have the conversations with a corporation, with an association, with whatever event. And so we build your talks based on that so that you have all the things that you need to be successful when you're going out and prospecting and pitching to clients. And then it's also something that I'm thinking about how to leverage in corporations just for leaders and, people who have to give presentations, because it's the same journey, right? How do you take people on this journey? And we have the entire framework and nobody teaches it like we do. Nobody has a framework like that. So.
Wow, that's outstanding. We were talking before the podcast. I'm saving up my money and my time and looking at my schedule because I'm getting my signature talk ready with Kelly Charles Collins, because I have seen you travel. I follow you on social media. And so definitely if you're listening, follow Kelly on social media and you'll see what we're talking about. She's doing outstanding work. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. How do people find you? How do they find your book and follow you on social and all the good things?
Just go to kellycharlescollins.com. You'll find everything there.
Cool. Yeah, it's a cute website. And listen, she talked about fashion. Do you see this background and the jacket and the earrings and I love this background. Definitely check out Speaker Moguls. Check out her 2 books. The TEDx talk is awesome. And I love that she talks about women's empowerment, unconscious bias, and definitely courageous conversations, because right now we need a lot more courageous conversations. And you know what? We might be hearing a little more from Kelly soon. So you guys stay tuned. See you next time. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. Support, share, subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.